What is up, everyone? It is Lan here with another episode of the Cheeseheadz Weekly Podcast. We're here for episode number 63 and excited to be with you all today. We're going to have a fun episode coming right up. A little bit different than perhaps what I told you last week, but we'll get right into it here in a minute. Before we do, just ways you can support the show here. You can check out the Q&As and the polls on Spotify. If you participate in those, just makes the show a lot of fun. Helps, to grow the show, but mainly promote discussion, make things fun for the show. There is a link in the description of every episode on every platform. Just send in a voice message. You can send in any questions you have for me, especially regarding Packers or anything else NFL, and I will have a good time trying to answer it, I'm sure. And you can even get your question put on the podcast, played on the show. So that will be fun as well. The show is available everywhere you get your podcasts, except for Amazon Music. It is available on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe there. You can hit the bell icon on Spotify or YouTube if you just so desire, and that will let you be notified when a new episode comes out. New episode comes out every Tuesday. Every week we have a new episode coming out. Be sure to rate the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I rate and review on Apple Podcasts, and that is a big help to the show as well, so I appreciate that. Also, you can follow me on social media. On X, at Cheeseheadz_W. Post a lot of different stuff there, some mock drafts, different stuff going on. And so you can check out stuff there. And, of course, I post reels and shorts on YouTube, X, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Have a Facebook page as well. And at Cheeseheadz_weekly for all of those places. And, of course, you can check out my website, greatcove.net/cheeseheadz. And that will let you listen to the episodes there, as well as show you all the different ways you can connect with the show. And, of course, you can comment on each episode there as well. All right, so we'll get right into it, deviating a little bit more away from just completely Packer stuff. We're going to do, I'm going to give you my tiered Dynasty Fantasy Football rookie rankings for 2024, the 2024 draft class that we have coming up here. The draft is coming up. And we'll get landing spots for these guys and know where to draft them. But I like to play Dynasty Fantasy Football and am playing in a league and doing some scouting, looking into a lot of these players to know who I want to draft in my Dynasty rookie draft. And it is a lot of fun, so I just really wanted to share it with y'all. So here we go. Basically, these are overall rankings, all positions. For Dynasty, and this is the league I play in is 1 QB, no tight end premium, and half PPR. So that gives you any indication. There's going to be quarterbacks are not placed very high as far as my draft philosophy goes. When I'm playing fantasy football, redraft, or Dynasty, I'm not a huge fan of taking quarterbacks really high. So you might not see quarterbacks up real high in these rankings, but again, I don't like to take quarterbacks really high because it's hard, it's hit or miss, especially in rookie drafts, and a lot of wide receivers at the top just because we have it's a great wide receiver class, and wide receivers tend to last the longest for Dynasty. So I'm not an expert at Dynasty. This is not a Dynasty football podcast, but I thought I'd make this fun, give you some advice for those of you that are listening and that play Dynasty fantasy football, that are preparing for your rookie drafts. And obviously these rankings definitely will change once the draft happens and we get landing spots and draft capital. That's a big part of the picture, big piece of the puzzle, whatever you want to call it. And that will make a huge difference on what picks I'm making, because landing spots do matter. All right, so we'll get into it. Tier 1 is made up of 2 players. Number 1 is wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. widely considered to be the top guy. Now, of course, since this draft season, we're getting a little prospect fatigue. Did not get to see Harrison Jr. test at all, and everyone is saying, oh boy, maybe Malik Neighbors is better than him. And now Malik Neighbors has moved up for me. In the past, Tier 1 would have been one player, Marvin Harrison. And I did debate putting Marvin Harrison in his own tier, Malik Neighbors in his own tier, just below. Perhaps that's the right place for him to be. I think Marvin Harrison is still the top guy. People are going to question him nonstop since nothing's happening on that front, really. But Marvin Harrison has shown it on tape consistently, and I have literally not even watched any of his tape. But from what I've seen and heard, I think he is the clear-cut number one prospect. But Malik Neighbors is number 2 and in this tier for me. And I'm excited for his potential. He did tested quite well at his pro day, and so he's looking very good. Tier 2, made up of 2 players again. Wide receiver Rome Odunze. 3 receivers going in the top. Before combine and some of this stuff in the early stages of the pre-draft process, I would have put Neighbors and Odunze in the same tier, in this tier 2, moved Neighbors down to tier 2. I think Neighbors has kind of separated himself from Odunze. Odunze did test extremely well at the NFL Combine, just is not quite as technically sound as a route runner, and for that reason he is slightly lower, but very nice prospect is Rome Odunze. Brock Bowers, tight end, is number 2 in this tier, number 4 overall, and he is a generational, as some people would say, tight end talent, probably one of those Kyle Pitts types. I think some people, and maybe myself included, especially now that you can see what Pitts has done in the NFL, I think Brock Bowers can be better than Kyle Pitts, but it does depend on the situation. Kyle Pitts' situation has not been great. He's flashed. I think he can be good, but again, the situation matters, and that has not worked out for Kyle Pitts. But Brock Bowers, clear-cut top tight end, and basically the only tight end of note in this draft, the only one I'm really excited to draft out of all the tight ends. This is a very weak tight end class overall. Into tier 3, it looks like I've got my numbers mixed up, so that could be interesting. But this is tier 3. We have wide receiver Troy Franklin. One of my favorite wide receivers in this draft. I watched some tape of him. Very strange build, very lightweight, but yet tall, rail thin, tall. Very interesting build, and that certainly limits his ability to make some contested catches, to perhaps, it limits kind of his physicality overall as a blocker. Not that that matters for fantasy, but it does matter for an NFL team and could keep him off the field a little bit. So I think that does make a little bit of a difference here for Troy Franklin, but I love his speed. And another thing that people would take against him is his testing at the combine. Not great, but I still am a fan of him, and he showed, like 4.41 was his 40 time. Not blazing. I think he is faster on tape. That is still not a bad 40. The gauntlet drill was what some people would say was not good at all. His tape is too good, and I have him ahead of another guy in this tier who perhaps other people would have above him. Number 2 in this tier is Ladd McConkey, wide receiver as well. I love what I've seen from this guy on tape. A little bit smaller as well. Perhaps will be a slot receiver in the NFL, but they are becoming of greater and greater importance. And I do think Ladd McConkey can play a little bit anywhere if a team wants him to. He is great in motion. I think you can... a very versatile piece at receiver. You can move him around, let him do a bunch of different things. Very shifty, and very, very good route runner. Everything I've seen looks really good. And that's another thing about Franklin. I think Franklin is really good, especially in zone coverage, at the ability of just creating space and finding that open spot on the field. Ladd McConkey is the same way, and especially see him over the middle a lot of times, just able to find the open space and sit down, let his quarterback find him, and then his run after the catch is pretty good as well, just with his speed and agility, and he did test well at the combine as well. Number 3 in this tier is QB1 in the draft, Caleb Williams. I debated a little bit putting another quarterback ahead of him because for fantasy it is a little bit different, but Caleb Williams, again, people have been talking about him, prospect fatigue again, but he is that generational guy. We'll see if he can do it in the NFL, but he looks like a really great talent, and I really do hope he can succeed. Number 4 in this list, Brian Thomas Jr. Likely most people would have him ahead of Troy Franklin and Ladd McConkey, but I do think, and this is basically just my personal preference, that Troy Franklin and Ladd McConkey, I just like them a lot better than Brian Thomas Jr. Now, I'll be honest, I have not scouted a lot of Brian Thomas. It's just scouting reports and stuff I've heard. I've not really decided to, watch highlights, whatever. I've heard some good things about him. I've heard some things, some underlying metrics, perhaps, analytics, that suggest that he has more of a possibility to bust. Maybe I've heard a few people even compare him to Terrace Marshall Jr., also out of LSU. Now, since he's coming out of LSU, you're going to draw those comparisons, and Terrace Marshall was, I think, maybe drafted in the same draft as Justin Jefferson, so again, overshadowed by another LSU guy. Malik Neighbors is also in this draft, overshadowing Brian Thomas, but tested well, rising up a lot of people's draft boards, likely will be a first-round pick, and I do think he's a good prospect. I just have a few red flags looking at him. That will round out my Tier 3. Into Tier 4, only 2 players in this one again, and they are both running backs. A lot of people would say this is not a strong running back class. Perhaps. There's not really any real top guys, not like a Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs in this class, but there are some exciting players. And number 1, I might surprise some people with this one, but I'm going to pick running back Jalen Wright out of Tennessee. I really love this kid. Again, he played in the SEC. Good competition. He just checks a lot of boxes for me, and when you watch him on film or watch his highlights, since I don't have all 22, he looks fantastic. He has a lot of explosiveness. The contact balance is phenomenal. His ability to just break tackles and somehow stay on his feet, the yards after contact, are great. Not an extremely big back, but also has that home run speed that you like to see in a back, tested extremely well at the combine, and is also a capable receiving back as well. So I don't see a ton of things wrong. His production profile maybe doesn't look as good as some of the others, but he's just a very good-looking back. Perhaps his vision is not always the best, but something that can be improved on, and that is why he's my running back run in this class. But running back 2 is in the same tier, and that is Jonathan Brooks out of Texas. He was overshadowed for most of his college career by Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson, both who are in the NFL now, including Bijan Robinson, who's considered kind of a generational running back prospect and is now playing for the Falcons. Now, Jonathan Brooks is not a Bijan Robinson. I think he can be better than Roschon Johnson, though. And a lot of people would say he's maybe more well-rounded and has the potential to be that workhorse guy. While some people I've heard it said that a lot of these guys are more of committee backs, and Jalen Wright has been put into that group. I don't really get it for Wright. I think he can be a workhorse, but you never know. Jonathan Brooks certainly seems like he can be a workhorse. I really love his vision and patience at the line of scrimmage to find the gap and then get through it. A little bit different player than the rest, and a lot of people probably would have him as their top guy, but for other reasons, because of injury. He did tear his ACL in his last year of college after starting off really good. That put some question marks there, especially for Dynasty. He might not be back playing until halfway through his rookie year, which is not a big deal. Maybe he won't contribute that much as a rookie either, but it does put him a little lower on some people's list. I still am a huge Jonathan Brooks fan. On to Tier 5. Here's my running back 3. A lot of people's running back 1. A lot of people are excited about this guy after the combine. I've never been a real fan, but I do get it, and it is Trey Benson. Vision issues is what I hear a lot of people say, and I don't really like that. I like guys that have vision. Jalen Wright, I did mention that. Vision is sometimes an issue. Other times it's just not an issue. And I've seen a lot of good vision reps from Jalen Wright. Now, Trey Benson, again, haven't watched really any film of him, but from what I've heard, vision is the issue. Now, he did test extremely well at the combine as well. Great speed, and will be one of the top running backs drafted in the NFL draft. But we'll have to see what the landing spot in the draft capital is. I just have never been a real huge fan of Trey Benson, and so I have him a tier down. My quarterback 2 is also in this tier. We have here Jaden Daniels out of LSU. Big time fan of Daniels. Have not watched a ton of highlights, but very somewhat tall and thin a little bit at the quarterback position, but was fantastic. Won the Heisman last year and had a ton of rushing upside, which is why I put him ahead of my quarterback 3, Drake May, who I think could potentially be a better passer and a better starting quarterback for an NFL team. But you, in rookie drafts and any fantasy football drafts, you have to aim high. You have to take those risks. Aim for the high ceiling, because that is what wins you championships. And so that's why I have Daniels ahead, just because of that rushing upside. And if he turns out as an NFL quarterback, he could be great for fantasy. Drake May, again, I do think he has a little more rushing upside than people think. Certainly not to the extent of Jaden Daniels, but I really like how, not a lot of people are talking about him, really high or really low. Like Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams have been the guys really talked about. Drake May has just kind of been there, and I think he's just a solid option. Good arm talent and has some rushing ability that I think he can tap into if needed. And my next 2 in this tier, guys, I'm not really a fan of. Both went to Texas, if I'm right on that. And we have wide receiver Xavier Worthy, who is known by many to be the fastest 40-yard dash, to have the fastest 40-yard dash at the combine ever. Broke John Ross III's time. Guess what? John Ross busted, and that was some people's reaction. Some people's reaction was like, oh, yes, we want this guy now on our dynasty teams. I'm more of the opinion that he's neutral. But I'm certainly not going with the speed and saying, oh, he's awesome, because he is a smaller receiver and didn't see a ton of downfield production. He did earlier in his career, I guess, but a lot of screens and stuff, and I think he could be a great gadget weapon. We'll just see how he works out. At Adonai Mitchell, also his teammate, Worthy's teammate, bigger guy, tested really well and was maybe a little bit of a surprise to some. Again, haven't really watched him that much, but I do see a lot of red flags that a lot of other people that I listen to on podcasts, whatever, also see. And so for that reason, I'm not very high on Mitchell and will likely not have him on many of my dynasty teams. But that does not mean he is a bad player and will not work out. It also does depend on landing spot as well. Into Tier 6. I'll be running through these a little faster because I don't know as much about them. J.J. McCarthy getting a lot of hype all of a sudden. I liked him as my sleeper quarterback. I went back and forth on him. I'm not really sure if I want him or not, if I want to be aggressive to try to take him. I do think he's better than some people think he is. I'm kind of in the middle on that as well, but not real high, not real low. And I probably won't be taking him because his value has skyrocketed, and I tend to like to look for the sleepers in drafts, and I don't think J.J. McCarthy has a high enough upside to be worth the value that he has been given, or the value that he is, or perhaps isn't. Running back Blake Corum is next on the list, McCarthy's teammate in college. Some people are higher on him. His athleticism is not off the charts. It's good, not great. I do like his vision, and that is kind of the thing. He's a smart running back and knows how to run the ball effectively, but again, not a great running back, not a home run hitter. And if he's in the right scheme, he could succeed, but just look for him going to the Chargers. Could definitely see that happening. He's been mocked there a lot. Marshawn Lloyd, running back out of USC, tested really well, an athletic freak, but there are some red flags, especially with vision issues. Likes to break runs outside a lot, but I do like him that he is a pass catcher. Showed out at the Senior Bowl and has tested really well and has risen on people's boards. I do like him to an extent, but not a huge fan of him. Xavier Legette. This guy was phenomenal. His 5th year of college only, and that's what's crazy. He was completely not there, 300-some yards a year, and then he puts up, over 1,000 yards, 1,100 to 1,200 yards, whatever it was, his final year, and just was incredible. And I just have a hard time believing in him, and for that reason, I likely won't be drafting him in in my rookie draft. Keon Coleman, another wide receiver, is up here. Love his, he makes a lot of highlight reel plays, but tends to disappear in some games, and just not sure he has what it takes. Has a few drop issues, which I'm not real concerned about. A lot of wide receivers have struggled with concentration drops. We've seen them make contested catches, and if we see them able to make contested catches on tape, they can make the easy catches too. It's just concentration drops can be easily cured. Christian Watson kind of had that problem in college as well. It seems to be just fine for him now. I think that can work out, and sometimes drop issues are a little bit overblown, if you ask me. But again, just not a fan of Keon Coleman. Did not test as well as people thought he would at the combine, and I'm pretty much out on him as well. Tight end 2 on in my rankings is Jatavion Sanders. Tested okay, pretty good. Doesn't really raise or lower his stock, but never really been a huge fan of Jatavion Sanders and tight ends. You don't hit on them very often, and if it's not a Brock Bowers, I'm probably not taking him in this draft. Tier 7. We have a lot of people in this one. First off, Ricky Pearsall, really high on him, really like him. Great at catching, great at route running. Perhaps not an athletic freak like some guys, but I really like the stuff he's good at. Route running is one of the top priorities, and strong hands is not a bad way to go with it. Made that crazy highlight reel catch. You should check it out. Look it up. Ricky Pearsall catch. Best had to be catch of the year in college football, and you do not see many catches like it. Number 2, wide receiver Jalen Polk, Rome Odunze's teammate. I really like him. He seems like a possession receiver. He's got comps to Dontavian Wicks, and that's kind of what he reminds me of. Just an all-around guy, can do a little bit of everything, and pretty good route runner. I think Wicks is probably better, but you never know what will happen once he gets to the NFL. Number 3 on the list, running back Braylon Allen, Wisconsin native, or perhaps not native, that's where he went to college. Big dude, athletic freak, and just crazy if you see pictures of him. But again, a little bigger back, which means a little slower, a little stiffer, not as quite as agile as some of the other guys would be. Not extremely high on Allen for that reason, but could definitely see him being taken in among this group of players. Malachi Corley. This guy is a lot of fun to watch for sure. Gets a lot of screen passes and shorter area stuff, but is a yak machine. I've heard people comp him to Deebo Samuel. I wouldn't go that far because there's really only one Deebo Samuel in the NFL, but he does have those Deebo-like traits, and I do see him as kind of that type of talent, and hopefully he can work out in the NFL. But amazing after the catch. Broken tackles all around when you watch his tape. Next guy on the list, Roman Wilson out of Michigan. Smaller receiver, likely profiles as a slot guy, but pretty good receiver. Don't know a ton about him. Jermaine Burton, wide receiver out of Alabama. Not heard a bunch of people talk about him. Perhaps a little bit of off-field issues, which I don't like to see. But I tell you what, downfield catches galore at Alabama, and I kind of like him for Dynasty, but again, would be a later round pick. Quarterback 4 now, we get to Michael Penix Jr., and quarterback 5, Bo Nix. I like Penix a little bit better. I think he's an accurate thrower. Pretty good there. Bo Nix a little bit raw, but definitely has some tools. Don't know a ton about him, but if you need quarterbacks, they're pretty good options, and after that, it's a pretty major tier drop. Next up, Will Shipley, running back. I have him a little higher than a lot of people do. I see him as a guy that can do a little bit of everything, can receive, pass block, can run, not be really, really great at anything, but I think he's a high floor prospect, and he actually did end up testing really well at the Combine, so excited to see what he can do. And to round out my Tier 7, I have tight end Ben Sinnott. Tested really well, kind of a riser throughout the draft process. Worth a late round flyer to me. Tier 8, second to last tier here. We're going to run pretty fast here. One of my favorite players to watch, Malik Washington, does a little bit of everything, highlight reel catches, does a lot of yak stuff, a little smaller guy, but tell you what, he can really break some tackles, and the main thing is kind of a raw route runner, but really, really fun to watch, and one of my favorite players. I will probably be taking him in the later rounds if possible. Jalen McMillan, next up here, the third wide receiver out of Washington, behind Odunze and Polk. Some people would have had him ahead of Polk until he got injured last year in college. Solid, likely a slot guy, a little smaller, but I like what he does. Devontae Walker, perhaps this is a little low for him, but he is basically a one-trick pony, a Marquez Valdes-Scantling, if you will, and I'm not a fan. I really am not a fan. Do not want to take this guy. He's probably the guy that I will not take in drafts unless there's absolutely no one else and I'm in the 4th round or something. After him is Jamari Thrash. A lot of fun to watch. Pretty small guy, but can run pretty good routes. Really like his short to intermediate area routes, but actually has pretty good speed too from what I saw on tape. Some guys would say he doesn't. I don't really know. I don't watch tape very much. But seems like a really good receiver, likely a slot guy, but I think he could be used as a gadget guy, take some jet sweeps, screens as well, and I like him for that. Audric Estime is next. Again, did not test extremely well, not really that fast, a little bigger back. A lot of bigger backs in this draft class, and so not a huge fan, but his film, from what I've heard, is pretty good. Another guy here, really interesting prospect, really tall, 6'6", Johnny Wilson, and wow, he's kind of fun to watch. But tested pretty well, ran a 5.52, which I'd say is pretty good speed or a 4.52. I'm not sure what I said there. I think I might have said 5.52. Pretty good speed for his size, being a 6'6", over 200. But, tall guy, definitely could be a jump ball specialist. Not sure if he'll be a ton more or not, like a wide receiver's 3 on a team. Next up, Ray Davis. I've not really scouted him much because he's 24, and I don't want to take old running backs specifically. If it's a wide receiver, maybe, but if it's an old running back, Running back shelf life is not great as it is, and if he's coming into the the NFL older, I'm not likely to take him. Bucky Irving out of Oregon. I really liked his tape until I saw how he tested, and he's a smaller back to begin with. And when you don't test well as a smaller back, that's not a great sign. I will likely not be leaving my drafts with him. Into Tier 8, I'll basically just list these guys off. Guys that I've heard a few good things about, have, some upside. Javon Baker, wide receiver. Brendan Rice, wide receiver. Jerry Rice's son, by the way, played with Caleb Williams at USC. Isaac Guerrero, the best running back tester in the class, was outstanding. I think his RAS score was in the 9.9s. Outstanding combine. Joe Milton has a ton of really fun physical tools, but reminds me of a Will Levis or Malik Willis. Very raw and not a guy I will be taking high. But if I can get him in the 4th round, why not take a flyer? Has some upside there. Very, very intriguing physical traits, and arm strength is crazy. Spencer Rattler next up. Theo Johnson, tight end. Spencer Rattler's QB, by the way. Jacob Cowing, wide receiver, smaller guy, likely a slot. Luke McCaffrey, probably the same with him. I think he did run the 40 faster than Christian. Cody Schrader, formerly went to a JUCO school, so definitely has risen up the ranks and played at Mizzou. Hopefully he can continue to get better. I kind of like him as a late-round guy. And then QB Michael Pratt. That will do it for me. By the way, that was Tier 9, not Tier 8, if that's what I said. I'm not sure what I said. So 9 tiers. All my guys, you got a little bit of analysis with the first few. Don't know as much about the last. But honestly, I scouted this more than I scouted Packers draft prospects. And I did not end up having time to get into my Packers draft stuff. I did post, I'm recording this on Monday, and I posted a mock draft on a quick 4-round mock draft on Twitter, or X, I guess. So you can check me out there at Cheeseheadz_W and comment your draft grade, what you thought about that. So that will basically do it for me today. Thanks for listening, everybody, to a non-Packers draft. And we'll get into cornerback, offensive line, defensive line needs for the Packers. Next time, hopefully, I can actually get a little bit of scouting in and get my ranks ready for that. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great day, and go Pack Go.